April 22nd, 2025. It's Talking Giants brought to you by SeatGeek. I'm Justin Penik. I'm joined by a close friend of mine, Ryan Dunleavy of the New York Post, NFL reporter, former Tony Award winner. Ryan, we just recorded for about 4 minutes, and then I realized I forgot to press record on the Zoom call. Luckily, we didn't get 20 minutes in, but how do you like that? I'm making mistakes. It's draft week. Hopefully, the Giants don't make mistakes. How are you doing quickly? And then I'll ask you everything that we already covered.
I was saying I'm doing pretty good, Justin. I'm back. I'm refreshed. I had a week off. I expect to have to write quite a bit about a lot of important players coming to New York from this draft, both for the Giants and the Jets. And so took a week off last week, got refreshed, and found out that some people around the NFL missed me, and they reached out to me for once instead of me being the one hounding them. So that was a nice little twist to stay connected while in line for mini golf tickets or whatever I was doing with my little kids.
Yeah, and I think you're saying how that's kind of a more unique thing, and I don't know if it's I don't know if we could take any big picture takeaways from that. Be like, oh well, this year's draft class it means this, and
I
uh,
think what it means is there's less certainty. I think that's what it means. I think when I think that usually you have a better picture of how the top 10 or so, which is usually where the Giants and Jets are picking, are going to play out than I think teams do this year. I think there's a lot of uncertainty, and I think that has a lot to do with the quarterback class, and it's underwhelming, but probably not as underwhelming as it was in 2022 when Kenny Pickett was 20th and then nobody else in the top 70. So I think people are like, is it that, or it's not as good as normal, but it's not as bad as that? So what's going to happen?
yeah, I think combining, last year there were six quarterbacks that went in the first round, so you're not going to have that. Combining the lack of consensus on any quarterback outside of Cam Ward. And then
Hmm.
also there's two players that are really top end talent
Correct.
in the draft. And then you just feel like there's such a fall off after that. You have no idea where things could go. Maybe besides tackle with New England, but besides that, like what are the Jaguars going to do at five? So I feel like that's
I'll argue this, and you know who I am. Your audience knows who I am. I'd argue there's three players in this draft class that are perennial Pro Bowlers, all pros. Uh
oh Ashton Gent. Oh yeah, 100.
yeah, we just don't talk about one because the Giants will never pick him, but
Right.
Ashton Genty is a stud player, and I wear the running back cape, so that's interesting too. Like who would pick him and when, and is somebody actually going to trade up for a running back? So yeah, but other than that, yes, to your greater point, I think there's a lot of uncertainty in this draft, and it starts with the quarterbacks. And then, like I said, I don't know that anybody has a consensus number one offensive lineman, a consensus number one receiver, a consensus number one corner outside of Travis Hunter.
Right.
I think I don't even think that most positions have a consensus number one, which is unusual.
Right. I'm hoping and praying Genty falls to the Bears. That's my dream. Put Ben Johnson, that offensive line that's kind of been revitalized a little bit. That would be really fun.
Content wise, I'd get a lot out of Ash and Genty going three to the Giants. I think I'd have some stories that I could write.
I think the stadium may burn. Um, for real this time. Like I think there actually will be people in the stadium, and I think it may burn. Um, yeah, let me ask you the question that's the most easiest question for me to ask sitting here, but it's probably one that's a little bit more complicated for you sitting on your end. Who are the Giants picking at pick three? Who's going to be a New York Football Giant this Thursday night?
Yeah, so you're right. It's the same three players it's been since it became clear that Cam Ward was going to be the number one pick. It's Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, or Abdul Carter, and really it's two players because the Browns are going to take either Carter or Hunter. So it's going to be Carter or Hunter or Shedeur Sanders. And last week, Justin, I would have told you at the start of my vacation, I would have told you that I thought the Giants would pick. It was going to be easy, best player available, and then trade up in the back half of the first round for either Tyler Shuck, Jalen Milrow, or Jackson Dart. I've gained a little clarity that I don't necessarily think all those players are in the conversation for the Giants. All those quarterbacks I just named, I don't think are in the conversation. I think Dart is significantly ahead of the other two. And then Sanders, I think, is a very strong possibility at 3 still. I think, as I tweeted today, the Giants want to come out of the top 34 picks with Sanders or Dart. And the only way they can guarantee themselves of doing that is to pick Sanders third overall.
Right.
And like, I know that's going to set people's hair on fire, but like, that's the only way because once you take the best player available, say it's Abdul Carter, and the I'll just make this up. The Saints take Jackson Dart at 9, and the Steelers trade up from 20 to 11 to get Shedeur Sanders. You're done. You didn't get them. It's over. Like you didn't get one of those two guys in your top 34. I think they really want to get one of those two guys in the top 34. Ideally, it would be on a trade up from 34 to 20 or 21 or something like that after already picking Sanders, after already picking Carter or Hunter. I don't know that they'll be able to do that. And I think there's probably a lot of people in the building this week making the case for like, hey, if we get Hunter or Carter and those other two quarterbacks we like go elsewhere, who's our fourth quarterback? And there's probably a lot of blank faces in that room right now.
Yeah. Ryan, I keep going back to this, man. Where were you there for? I'm sure you were for the.
I didn't answer your question. So today I would
Oh,
say it's Shedeur Sanders.
oh, I got that.
Today, who do the Giants pick at 3? I would say you had me on 6 o'clock Thursday after more phone calls. I'd have a different answer. Today, I would say Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, I got that. I keep going back to this, and if you're banging your head in the wall over how many times I repeat this, but I think it's that important. We've heard John Mara basically speak once when the season ended, and it wasn't even a presser. It was, just he just took questions on the indoor practice field. Uh, and the thing that he said in that is that the number one goal for this offseason is to find a franchise quarterback.
Mm.
The odds of you finding a franchise quarterback in free agency, I think it's usually slim to none, right? Like even if they were to go after a Sam Darnold for like
That's the only option.
that would have been the only option, but still, like if the goal is to go out and get your franchise quarterback, you're probably not finding that guy in free agency. And even if they land Matthew Stafford, which they offered a lot of money to, and they offered draft picks, they offered whatever to the LA Rams. Matthew Stafford's not a quote unquote franchise quarterback, even though I think John Mara would have been. I think John Mara would have been fine with that. Like, hey, we got this guy. He's going to help us for this year. Let's not. We don't feel the need to draft a quarterback, right? So the Giants have gone through this offseason, signing Russell Wilson to a 1-year deal and Jameis Winston to a 2-year deal. That's a backup deal, a deal that was better than Drew Lock's deal for crying out loud. That's the Giants quarterback room right now, and I still have that quote ringing through my head that the owner of the team at the start of this offseason has said that the number one priority is to find the next franchise quarterback. And even though I want them to take either Carter or Hunter, like that's what I want and that's what I'm rooting for as a fan. I think the Giants can get through it this year at quarterback, and I also just don't believe in Shedeur Sanders. I keep going back to that quote, being like, why did John Mara say that? John Mara has to have some sort of belief that that guy can be found in the draft this year, and I don't think that guy was Cam Ward. I think it was Shedeur Sanders. So that's what I keep going back to, Ryan, and I'm very, very surprised at the general consensus at how that's kind of almost been lost through this process.
So a couple things. You said a lot there. Matt Stafford, Paul Schwartz, my colleague at the Post, does a tremendous job. Been covering the team since '94, knows everybody in the organization. I said yes, wrote that. John Mara was on board with the Matthew Stafford with the new contract. With that, he would have been giddy. It sounded like
Yeah,
that's my word, not his. To get Matthew Stafford. So I think that would have solved that. Needed some convincing, eventually got there with the help of Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh on the possibility of Aaron Rodgers, but would have signed off on that too. So That takes care of that. Yes, I agree with you. That quote is one of the two quotes that ring through in my head the most from the offseason were both said that same day, not at the combine, not at the owners' meetings. The two things that were said that stuck in my head are the one you just said. John Mara saying we need to find our quarterback franchise. Can't remember. Did you say franchise quarterback or quarterback of the future? That was one of the most important. And then the Joe Shane no self-preservation Hail Marys was to me was very important. They almost play at odds. So they're almost odd against each other. Uh, yes, I think to your point that he's saying that because at that point it's easy to forget now that Daboll and Schoen were both on the hot seat for most of last season, and we know now that on the Friday before the season finale, they both had long hours long meetings with John Mara. John Mayer is a really smart guy. He no doubt asked and liked what he heard about the future quarterback plan. I cannot believe it in any way that the way they saved their jobs was to go in and say, "Hey, we're going to pursue Aaron Rodgers and Matthew Stafford." I think that was a victim. That was circumstances, like on January 11th or whatever that was, January 4th, whatever that was. There was no way Joe Shane knew that those two guys would be available, so he couldn't have sold John Mara on Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers and Jameis Winston. So there's no doubt in my mind that he and Brandon Brown, who had like basically had were paying taxes in Colorado over the fall, there's no doubt in my mind that they were very high on Shedeur Sanders at that time. Could things that have happened since then have swayed their opinion? Sure. But the number one thing that happens between now and then is coaches get involved. I've talked to a coach who's been in the NFL for 20 years. He said that even on the worst teams he's had, and he's been part of 2, 3 win teams, no coach does any draft homework during the season. None. Zero. So like when Brian Daboll's having those meetings, he's going based off what he's seen on TV when he's talking on to John Mara. So like his draft, and then even when you talk to assistant coaches at the combine and you start mentioning players, they're like, "Bro, I just started my work on this draft like last week." So like even the combine is early for coaches to get involved. Now is when coaches have like their full breadth of information. That those three quarterback workouts they did last week, that wasn't for Joe Shane and Brandon Brown and Tim McDonald and Dennis Hickey. That was for the coaches to get their like full breadth of information on, that was for Kafka and Daboll and Tierney. So like the long story short is like, yeah, what they said in December or January to Mara matters, but like the coaches hadn't done their full workup yet. So like what you're hearing now about like, oh well, maybe they've cooled on Shedeur Sanders. The only conclusion that leads you to is that the front office would be much more invested in anybody, Sanders obviously, anybody that was a hot topic for the Giants in early January or late December and has cooled since then is, well, the coaches don't like him as much, and vice versa. Anybody who you didn't think they were hot on then, who they are now, if all of a sudden you heard like, wow, the Giants have to have Mason Graham, that would tell me Andre Patterson was beating down the door for Mason Graham. So that's how things work timeline wise.
All right, before we keep talking with Ryan Dunleavy, I got to talk to you about True Classic because today's episode is sponsored by True Classic. They got one mission to make sure guys look good and feel even better, and they've nailed it. Feel and price across your entire wardrobe. It's not just tees, but hoodies, jeans, activewear, everything you need to level up your everyday style. And I can tell you firsthand, I love True Classic, love everything that they're about. I especially love that their jeans, they feel really good, especially around my buns. Forget overpriced designer nonsense. Skip the cheap throwaways. True Classic delivers premium essentials built for real life. This is real life. Grab yours at Target, or Costco, or head to trueclassic.com/talkingiants to get hooked up today. trueclassic.com/talkingiants. Get hooked on True Classic because they're good, they're awesome. And back to Ryan Dunleavy. Another one of the things that I've been thinking about as the offseason goes on, and you kind of hinted at it, is some sort of possible disconnect between whether it's front office, ownership, coaching. I feel like there's kind of those like three branches, big picture wise, right? And
Yep.
I'm wondering how the organization is navigating varying voices and opinions on what to do and or really, who. Like I'm really talking about pick three. There's a question about identity in the draft and hey, this draft is in the trenches and things like that. Day two and day three. I mean, that's a whole other point, but basically from pick three, and is it Shedeur Sanders or not Shedeur Sanders? I feel like it's basically where we're at. What's your kind of input on that? Like you hinted at, Joe Shane being in a certain spot, and maybe the front office liking Shedeur Sanders, and maybe it's Brian Daboll that he as a coach would want to go in a different direction. John Mara, like are we full on John Mara and ownership wanting quarterback QB of the future because that's what these guys saved their jobs on with that kind of promise?
Here's what I know. John Mara would not. People are going to lose their minds. John Mara is not going to force the Giants to take a quarterback. I don't think he forced them to take Daniel Jones. I don't. I really don't. I know people think that. I really don't think that. It's not like daisies and rosebud that I don't think about. Like I've asked, and I really don't think that. Like I've talked to people who were involved in that decision, and they did not feel John Mara forced them to take Daniel Jones. I don't think he would force them to take a quarterback this year, especially after seeing how poorly it worked when they forced Daniel Jones. So like yes, and the quote from John Mara was, number one issue for us going into the offseason is to find our quarterback of the
All
future.
right, so I was wrong.
Future.
Hand up.
So, so yes, I do think that matters. I do think that weighs on him. I don't think in any regard he would force them to do it. I do think he will make sure that they turn over every stone. I do think that if they came to him and said like, "Hey, I don't think we're going into this direction," I think he would say, "Hey, well, let's make sure we run this up to the 11th hour. Let's make sure we get that extra workout in with these guys." Like, I do think he is a turnover every stone kind of guy. So that would be to my influence. He said many times that he breaks ties is his only player personnel input. Like if the coach and GM are absolutely deadlocked, then he breaks ties. He said that before. He said it happens very rarely. Daboll talked today because it was the first day players reported.
Right.
He got three questions about hypothetically if you and Joe Shane are not on the same page about who to draft. Uh, and he actually gave some pretty good insight about how, like, yeah, there are disagreements. Like, he didn't poo-poo what me and several others have reported, that there is not a consensus in the room right now. He made it seem like that's a good thing. Like you want to have disagreement, not be disagreeable, I think is what he said. But he didn't answer the main question, which is like, okay, how does this get settled? Does somebody have to give in and lose? Do you just watch tape like we've all disagreed, right, with our buddies or our
Yep.
wives or our partners or whatever? Like like eventually what happens is like somebody usually gives in and is like, okay, I'll give in this time, but you owe me one. Well, Daboll and Shane don't have a you owe me one. Whoever gives in this time might never get the chance to get the payback because they might both lose their jobs. This might be their last draft together. So, like, ultimately, the draft, just like coaching decisions are ultimately on Daboll, the draft is ultimately on the front office. So, like, you'd like to think that they're going to reach a consensus, but if not, Daboll's probably going to have to be the one who caves.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you get the
And call this what it is too. It sure seems like Daboll was on a hotter seat last year than Shane was.
Oh yeah.
We know John Mara prefers stability in the front office. So like if you had to guess, this is Ryan Dunleavy saying this, not sourced. Like if you had to guess who has more equity, probably Joe Shane. So like I think if it comes down to it, and they're disagreeing, I think Joe Shane will be the one who makes the final decision because that's his job. B, he has more equity, but you'd like to think they'd come to an agreement. I've always heard, I will say this. I know that I'm one of Joe Shane's biggest critics. I will say I have heard from people in the building who have been there for multiple regimes that Joe Shane is as uh welcomes everybody's input, less my way or the highway, more collaborative than either of the people who came before him.
Yeah.
So, so I will say that about Joe Shane. I don't think he will Bigfoot somebody.
Yeah. And Shane, I mean, Shane even said that, during his pressure last week, like at the end of the day, it's my call. If
Yes.
at the end of the day, it is his call. So here, I'll even, because I think we're dancing around a little bit.
And again, who do we think now put two and two together? Who they liked Shedeur Sanders in the fall when the scouts on the front office were doing most of the work. The end of the day, we think it's going to be his decision. That's kind of why I'm leading you towards. I think it's number three. Three is Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah. I mean, and everything that we've heard through basically since the combine, and Schefter has said almost every week, well, I'm starting to lean that it's Carter, or I'm starting to lean that it's Hunter. Basically whoever doesn't go to Cleveland, it's that other blue chip, position player that's not quarterback, right? And I feel like that's been the beat that kind of Schefter and the national media has been kind of, marching the last couple months. And
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly on an island.
yeah,
Everybody else is on the best player available, and I'm on an island. Yeah.
but do you inevitably feel, because you've kind of hinted at it, but I'm going to kind of put your back on the wall right now. Do you inevitably feel like there is a somewhat disconnect between Brian Daboll and Joe Shane on, Daboll may want position player and Shane may want Shedeur Sanders?
I don't know that I feel there is a big disconnect between them in their jobs. Like, I know that that is a narrative that seems to be building. I don't know that I see that. Do I necessarily think that they are going to agree on the third pick? No, but like, again, I think that probably happens. Like, do I know for sure that Joe Shane didn't want Deontay Banks and Brian Dable didn't want Zay Flowers or what? Like, I don't know that. Uh, and then no, you know what I mean? Like, I just because they might not agree on number three doesn't mean I think there's a disconnect in their working relationship or whatever. I think,
Yeah.
yeah, I think probably that happens, probably that happens a lot. Like I don't like I don't know that Shermer and Dave Gettleman both wanted Saquon Barkley. In fact, I think they probably didn't both want Saquon Barkley. I think let's say I know Dave Gettleman wanted Saquon Barkley and Pat Shermer wanted Josh Allen and they took Saquon Barkley. So like uh does that mean there's a disconnect in the relationship? I mean, they got along fine. They didn't get along like Dave Gettleman and Joe Judge got along. So yeah, I don't necessarily know that I think there is going to be agreement on number three, but I don't think that means there's that then turn around they won't be able to work together the next week.
I like to usually ask this question during training camp, as I feel like there's more storylines in training camp. There's more to watch. There's more to follow, and things like that. But I'm going to ask you this now, because I feel like everybody is different in terms of how they prepare for the NFL draft. Are you looking at players? Or are you just looking at storylines and things like that? So what's something you're thinking about or considering that maybe others aren't? Like, we just sat here and talked about quarterback or not quarterback for 20 minutes. So
Yeah.
what's something that you're considering, thinking about, writing about, researching that maybe others aren't right now when it comes to this Giants draft?
Well, I'll give you a couple things. Number one, I would say is the thing I'm most interested in, honestly, is the 34th pick and whether they trade up for that and whether Joe Shane dips into 2026 assets and whether he is allowed to dip into 2026 assets. Remember, that was a big thing with Dave Gettleman. Is like, well, this guy might not be here. How are we going to let him mortgage the future? And then the job becomes uh less attractive to the next guy. And sure enough, the next guy was hired was Joe Shane. And one of the reasons he loved the job was he had two picks in the top seven. He ends up taking Kayvon Thibodeau and Evan Neal. But like because he had extra stuff in the coffers, that's why he loved the Giants job when he was a hot candidate. So like I'm very interested in like, do they trade up from 34? Again, Jackson Dart, I think, would be the guy. Do they trade up from 34? What would that cost? Does he trade back at all? Again, that's no self-preservation Hail Marys. Trading back is not a spot where you trading back is more of a futuristic thing. Is he thinking future or is he thinking right now? I'm very interested. Right guard, like 65, they can get a really good player at 65,
I agree.
and probably a really good big guy. And that might be on defense if that like if Darius Alexander from Toledo is available at 65, if like is it Alfred Smith from Texas?
Alfred Collins. Do I mean,
Alfred
that's
Col
if there's
yeah.
one player I want to walk away with, it's Alfred Collins
Yeah,
from Texas.
like
He's the
there are some good defensive tackle. This is a really deep defensive tackle draft. The Giants have a huge hole at defensive tackle. Like they could get a starter there at 65. They have a curse of years of bad third round picks. Drew Phillips may have ended that. I'd like to see more from him, but he may have ended that. If they could get a really good player at 65, they could get a right guard, like, or they, don't go quarterback.
Oh,
Maybe they go, well, if
get
they go
both.
shoot, huh?
I'm hoping and praying that this is a draft class where it's like get both.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well,
Like,
well, what if, yes, everybody's going to moan if Shedeur is the third pick, but if Shedeur is the third pick, you don't have to worry about quarterback the rest of the way. You go 300 pounder at 34, 300 pounder at 65, and then all of a sudden now you have a new starting right guard and a new guy next to
yeah,
Dex and a quarterback. And it's like, okay, well, that's probably a pretty good start to the draft because you don't need an edge rusher, a corner, or a receiver. You're picking them because their names are Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter. If you pass on them, it's not like then you have to circle back to, oh, now we have to get the guy to fill wide receiver slash corner. No, your roster isn't very good, but it's like wide receiver and corner aren't huge needs. That you're just picking Travis Hunter because he's Travis Hunter.
yeah.
So yeah, I think they could get starters at 65, 34. So I think there's a lot of ways they could go there. And how they go at 3 kind of sets up the whole draft board. Because if they don't go quarterback at 3, either 34 or 65 is going to be a corner. Is going to be a quarterback.
I mean, I just what's your philosophy on that? I think it's a waste because if it's not a guy that you think,
Yeah, it's a waste, but they're gonna do it. Like that, people always mistake Justin. People always mistake like, oh, what I'm saying they would do for like what I would do. But like, yeah, it's a waste. But because I've seen it. It's Kyle Lauletta, it's Davis Webb, it's Ryan Nassib, it's you know, it's Christian Hackenberg, it's Bryce Petty, it's
yeah,
like I've seen all the guys, right? Like, yes, Jalen Hurts worked out and Russell Wilson was a grand slam, but like they're 1 in 10, 1 in 20. So like, yeah, I think it's a waste too, but they're going to do it
I know.
because they need the young guy in the room to say to ownership, look, this is our guy. And he's going to learn from Russ and he's going to learn from Jameis. And this is the guy we can move forward with. And they need it. They need to check the box for young quarterback who we drafted. Like, imagine if you're Joe Shane and you get fired next year and you never drafted a quarterback in 4 years. You're going to beat yourself up for that. So you're going to pick one. You're going to develop him. And if you're still here, you're probably going to play him. And if you're not still here, you can say, well, I picked Jalen Milroe, but I never got the chance to they never gave me the chance to see how he would have developed. So I really didn't get a fair shot.
Yeah. Hold on 1 second, Ryan Dunleavy, because the MLB season is finally here, and with SeatGeek being MLB's official ticket marketplace, your tickets are fully guaranteed and instantly fulfilled in your account after purchase. And with our partners at SeatGeek, you can now get 10% off any tickets with code GIANTS2025. With over 28 million downloads, SeatGeek is the #1 rated ticketing app. There are more than 70,000 events listed on SeatGeek, including concerts, sports, festivals, and more. Right now, you get tickets to baseball games, NBA, and NHL, not to mention tons of concerts and other events. I want to go to a Knicks playoff game, maybe. What? I'm going to be using SeatGeek with code Giants2025, and you know we came through for you guys. You can use code Giants2025 for 10% off your next set of tickets at SeatGeek. That's 10% off any tickets with promo code Giants2025, all one word. Back to talking about the draft with Ryan Dunleavy. How refreshing is it to hear Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson talk, and when you actually transcribe, there's actually words there that you have to pay attention to,
Yes.
and there's a substantial amount. I think Russell Wilson during his first presser when he was rattling
He
off
talked again today.
and he rattled off the entire roster. I think he broke the record for most words spoken like per minute in franchise history. So how nice.
No, Joe Judge holds that record
Oh,
from
for a
post.
quarterback, for a quarterback.
Oh, okay, for a quarterback. Yes, probably for a quarterback. Yeah, that's probably true. I mean, look, yeah, I mean, they're totally different. Jameis is a character. He makes you laugh. Russell's a total professional. It's almost like Russell goes up there with like his 10, I need to say these things, and he jams them in across the 12 minutes and hits all the major keynote points and knows exactly what, like I asked him a Knicks question today because for like our Knicks people, and I was like, I just threw out a Knicks, like, hey, I saw you at the Knicks game. You're gonna be a regular? Oh yeah. I love to be surrounded by greatness. And it was just like, that's the perfect answer. Like, yeah, and not like, oh, I like, yeah, if it's free, it's for me. I love going. Like,
Yeah.
no, it was like, I like to be surrounded by greatness. And that's just like something a franchise quarterback should say. Like, yeah, I did. I like going to Jalen Brunson and Anthony Towns because they're great and I want to be great. And like, I'm surrounded by great. He just knows the right thing to say. There's no tricking Russell Wilson. So, and he's not afraid of, like, sometimes you got the feeling like Daniel Jones thought we were trying to trick him when we weren't trying to trick him. And so he just defaulted into like robotic say nothing mode. Like Russell Wilson says plenty. He just will never talk himself into a bad corner.
Right.
So, and he gives you anecdotes, which is what we care about. No, I mean, it is. To answer your question, it's refreshing.
So it's day one of the offseason program. How do you like that both of them, not just one, not just Russ, who's the starter, both of them, Russ and Jameis Winston, go up there and they speak to the offense.
I thought it was a good move by Daboll. And again, people know I don't hand out compliments easily. Thought it was a good move by Daboll. I thought it was good for Jameis to feel the weight of leadership along with Russell Wilson. It's very clear that he is going to be here next year. Russell probably will not be. So it's very clear. I thought it was good for him. He obviously thinks of himself as a starting caliber quarterback, a veteran in this league. So it was good for him, I think, to feel like valued. And I think it was good for the young players in the room to say like, oh, we have two leaders here. Like the guys who aren't necessarily on the field practicing with Russell every day see like, oh, I'm not practicing with some bozo. I'm practicing with one of the leaders of our team, Jameis Winston. So I thought it was a smart move by Daboll. And as I was just mentioning their contracts, it set me up for another thing I was thinking about, which is if this regime, like what they did with the Jameis Winston contract, is like kind of what they did with the Tyrod Taylor contract, which is like they set it up so that like when they originally declined Daniel Jones's option, when they first got here,
Yeah.
it was like Daniel Jones on a 1 year tryout and Tyrod Taylor for 2 years so that he would be the starter the second year with the quarterback they drafted to replace Daniel Jones. Obviously, that never happened because they were good and they re-signed Daniel Jones. But like that's kind of what they did here is like if you knew Joe Shane had a longer leash, you'd be like, oh, they're not picking a quarterback this year. That was why they signed Jameis Winston because he's here for 2 years to be Russell's backup and then next year's starter for the rookie they draft next year. That's what you would be thinking if Joe Shane had a longer leash. Jameis, the reason they gave Jameis the 2 year contract is to groom next year's starter once Russell Wilson leaves. But because he doesn't have that long leash, you can't think that way.
Right. Right. All right. One more question, then I'll let you go. Because it's been floated around on Monday that Jalen Hyatt, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Evan Neal are three
Yeah.
possible trade candidates for the Giants to move
Yeah.
up or maneuver around the draft. What's your take?
Uh So I have a couple takes. One, let's give Adam Schefter credit. He's the one who put all three
Yes,
names
yes,
out.
Adam Schefter.
So he put all three names out. Now look, it doesn't take a lot of speculation. Like I could have, if you asked me the three players most likely to be traded, that's probably who I would have told you. Now let's be fair here. One, to make a trade, you have to have interest, right? Who wants Evan Neal and Jalen Hyatt at this point? Jalen Hyatt, super nice kid. He has 0 touchdown catches in 2 years.
Yeah,
Like you can draft somebody with 4 years on their contract if you're a team, why am I taking your guy with 2 years on his contract who hasn't performed when I'll just take, Jalen Noel or whatever, who I believe I have for 4 years, I believe is a better player. So like I'd be very surprised if they can get anything. I mean, you're talking like a sixth round pick swap or something. That is not worth doing to me if you're the Giants. Um, Evan Neal, you might be able to get something for Evan Neal. Again, you're talking about like Evan Neal and a 7 for a 6 or something. Like I would probably rather just hang on to Evan Neal, especially if he's willing to work at guard. I would because I want to make Greg Van Roten a backup. That's what I want to do. I want to make Greg Van Roten a backup. So maybe Evan Neal's the starter. Maybe it's a guy we pick at 34 or 65. But like, I don't want the same 5 starting offensive linemen. That's not what I want. So like, maybe it's Evan Neal with Illuminor at right tackle. So but again, maybe you get something. Thibodeau's the interesting one because, like, if you do pick Abdul Carter and you need to trade from 34 to 20 to get Jackson Dart or Shedeur Sanders, that's a chip that you could be like, I'll give you 34, uh, 154 and Kayvon Thibodeau, who just became expendable because we picked Abdul Carter. Kayvon Thibodeau is like the equivalent of in that trade like a third round pick. So I'll give you 34 Kayvon instead of a third round pick and a fifth round pick. So he's the one that like I don't think he'll get traded because I think the Giants need to. We've said this a million times. Like, what are the Giants good at, Justin? Like, what's their identity? And I don't know.
I don't have one.
Some bad teams have identities, right? Like some bad teams that you're like, oh, well, that team can at least, has 2 good receivers and they can throw the ball, or that bad team has Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed, so it's hard to throw on them. Like, um, I don't know what the Giants are good at. If you draft Carter to Brian Burns, Dexter Lawrence, and Kayvon Thibodeau, I would tell you the Giants have an identity, and that is a fearsome front seven.
Yeah.
So I don't think I would want to then turn around and strengthen it with Abdul Carter and then weaken it by trading Kayvon Thibodeau. But he could get traded in the scenario that I've mentioned now 12 times, where they trade up from 34 to 18, 19, 20 to get a quarterback. That could make sense. And there are teams that I think would value him again as like the comparable to a day 2, like a third or fourth round pick.
Yeah. I mean, Joe Shane said that I think they're going to visit any 5th-year option stuff. They're obviously not going to pick up Niels, but I could see them picking up Thibodeau. Even if they draft Carter, I would pick up Kayvon Thibodeau's 5th-year option, and then then he's a trade piece down the road if you don't want to extend him. But yeah, so that'll be up to if he's traded. That'll be up to any team that if they want to pick, accept that or decline that. Odds are you want to if it's $14 million, like hell yeah, I'll take a pass rusher that can get me sacks for $14 million. And then they can
Thing
negotiate.
I, the other thing I want to see them do. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I have a million thoughts running through my head because I don't have my
Yeah.
own podcast. Uh, the other thing I want to see them do, just so I'm emptying the tank for you here. The other thing I want to see them do is not overvalue their own players. How many times have you and I had a conversation where it's like Cordell Flott's a starter just because they drafted him in the 3rd round of the draft? Like, stop. I'd like to see them draft over their own players so they make their former starters into backups, and that's how you build depth. Like, I don't want to see them not pick a guy because it's like, well, we're earmarking that spot for Micah McFadden. It's like, no, if Barrett Carter is significantly better than Micah McFadden, then turn Micah McFadden into a backup and and add depth. Like stop, like that's what I'd like to see them do. Stop discount if a better version of Wandale is on the board. I don't know. I wrote this name's in my head because I just wrote about him. The Va Tech kid, Jalen Lane. If he's a better version of Wandale, then pick him and let him compete with Wandale.
Yeah.
Or there's another Torrey Horton at
Yeah.
Colorado
Yeah.
State.
Horton, yeah.
If he's a better version of Wandale, then pick him and Wandale can fight. Like I would like to see the Giants draft over some of the guys they've been earmarking for development and have actual competition in the room. When they've said for years, like, we want competition. Well, the competition has been down here. So, like, yeah, it's competition, but it's competition between two guys who should be backups to start. Let's have competition between two guys who should start to see which one starts.
Yeah, and I think the biggest mistake that Joe Shane made in 2022 is just
Oh, there's
he
a
felt
lot.
he felt the need he felt the need to just draft positions instead of good players. Where
And he's admitted that. Yeah.
he 100% has. Now he'll still, as the lights go out in Georgia, because that's what it does in this room when I don't move for 40 minutes. He, while also admitting that that was not the best approach to take in 2022, well, then he still defended, well, like the John Michael Schmitz pick in the second round of the next year. Like, okay, Ben Bredesen transitioning to center was going to be the plan, and then they had like what, Austin Schlottman or whoever.
Yep.
So like there are
Yep.
certain things where he's like, okay, well, I'm glad you're admitting things here. Also,
Yep.
I would rather you just get it right and not admit when you're wrong, especially
Correct.
these massive f ups like an entire draft class. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I think the majority of Giants fans are, you said I'm one of Joe Shane's biggest critics. I think we're right there with you. Uh,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we'll see. Crush this draft class. You'll have two nice draft classes. Hopefully, last year's draft class builds off. Hopefully, we win 7 games this year and we see promise.
That would, yeah, I mean, that would flip the narrative. It would probably give them
7 games.
different, huh?
7 games. Have you looked at the home schedule, by the way?
Yeah, they might not win a home game.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
thought last year was
Yeah.
better.
Yeah, no, I mean, I mean, they're gonna have to be much better. I mean, they're gonna have to they'll have to be much better, and that not just the roster, the coaching's gonna have to be much better too. So, no, I mean, look, they're fighting an uphill battle, tough schedule, uh, fourth best team in their division. Like they're gonna have to improve. I wonder, Malik Neighbors is a stud. I don't know how great the rest of the draft. They were a 3-14 team. Of course all the rookies played.
Yeah,
Like of course they had big impacts because because they didn't all the other players were not any good.
yeah,
Like yeah, so like I need to see I look, it was better than the last two draft classes. I would like to see as much as like this rookie class will be important in 2025. If Drew Phillips and Tyler Newman are like really good players, then yeah, Joe Shane has done a good that has turned things around, equity, blah blah blah. If they're just a guy in year two, like what Drew Phillips and Tyler Newman did was good for rookies.
yes.
It won't be good for year two.
No,
Like that,
If Tyler Newman doesn't continues to not touch a football,
correct.
it'll be
It
like,
was like, oh, he played 98% of the snaps as a rookie. That's pretty good. He had one pass defended.
yeah,
So, like, if he has one pass defended in year two, then you're going to have a very different opinion of him.
yeah,
So,
and I think he can.
so
I think he can.
yeah, sure. Like I said, I think there was signs of promise. I'm not ready to say this was like the Chiefs 2022 draft class where like they hit like four all pros. Like Creed Humphrey in the third round and Trey Smith in the fifth round. The Giants don't have anybody in that stratosphere yet. Or Trent McDuffie, like the Giants don't have anybody in that stratosphere yet. They have starting players. None of those guys was like, oh, Theo Johnson's going to the Pro Bowl. Like he was like, okay, he's a starting player.
Yeah. All right, Rye, take a breath. 2 more days. Grind out the weekend, and then we go on a little vacation. How about that? You sound good to
Uh,
you?
it does sound good to me. It won't happen. I'll be doing a 1,600 word deep dive profile into
Oh, hell yeah.
whatever guy they pick six or three, whatever guy they pick three. I'll be calling his high school coach, his best friend, his mom, his dad. That's what I'll be doing. So my vacation was last week.
Ryan Dunleavy, New York Post, former Tony Award winner, good friend of mine. Thank you, Ryan, for joining me.
Appreciate you. Thanks for having me.
I'm still working on an outro of the show. I'll probably see you. I think I'm going to see you for a first round draft recap. That's where I'm going to see you. So see you then.
See
Bye.
ya.